My name is Professor James E. Starrs, George Washington University, Law and Forensic Science faculties. I'm standing in today for Linda Kenny, who's out there doing her lawyer job, making money today, and I'm a stand-in for her. That doesn't mean I'm not prepared. I hope that I am. I'd like to make some preliminary comments, however. Having investigated many historical cases myself, I won't discuss all of them in my introductory remarks, but as the moderator, I think I can have that latitude to make some comments. One is, for example, there's one theme that runs through all the things you've heard this morning, and that is, well, is the end result from what you've all said that there's somebody else involved? Regardless of whether Oswald was involved, is someone else also involved? And it seems to me the theme is yes, someone else was involved. Well, if you can't prove who it was, then we're not going to listen any further. I've had this happen time and time again. Lizzie Borden, for example. If you can prove that Lizzie Borden didn't do it, that's fine. All the scientific evidence shows she didn't do it. But we're not going to believe any of that scientific evidence until you can point the finger of guilt at somebody else. And if you can't, then she's guilty. It's kind of guilt by the process of exclusion. Nobody else is available to convict, and therefore she's got to be guilty. So I hope that we don't fall into that trap with respect to this. In addition, there's another trap, and unfortunately I view it as the probabilistic, the statistical trap. As I was listening to the presentations this morning, I found a plethora of, now if you factor in, it would seem to be, there might have been, and it's probable that, I would estimate, it could be, there was enough of these vague, mystifying, and sometimes misleading probabilistic statements to stuff an oversized Thanksgiving turkey. And I'm troubled by that, especially when someone professes to have hard facts and then prefaces those hard facts with those probabilistic statements. To me, what I'm hearing today so far is déjà vu all over again, as one of the great wonders of the world once said. Déjà vu all over again. Just because new technologies are available and they open avenues of new historical research, do they in fact contribute to the wealth of new learning that we may seek in all proper terms to accomplish? Day after day, for example, I've had that problem. So, for example, in the exhumation conducted in connection with the assassination of Huey Long, Senator Huey Long, there were lies galore with respect to what happened in the corridor in Baton Rouge. Lies under oath before the East Baton Rouge coroner's inquest. Does that mean that Carl Weiss didn't do it, that Dr. Weiss didn't do it? The gun that was taken from Dr. Weiss and the bullet that was taken from someplace was mystically lost for 56 years. Does that mean that there was a conspiracy at higher-ups for the purposes of making certain that Huey Long was killed and it wasn't Dr. Weiss? The Lindbergh baby investigation. Charles Augustus Lindbergh Sr. authorized, when he had no legal authority to do so, the cremation of the remains of this child that was found skeletonized down the road from the house from which he was allegedly kidnapped. That was against the law to do that. He had no authority. Does that mean that that authority that he took to himself indicates a conspiracy? Same thing is now being said about JFK. The autopsy should have been conducted by Texas law in Dallas, but it wasn't. He was spirited away to Bethesda Naval Hospital. Does that mean that the government was involved in a conspiracy for the purposes of covering it up? Or was it simply a blunder, a mistake? And blunders and mistakes occur, as Sean Connery said in the movie, galore in cases of this kind. To give you an example of the Hinckley case. Hinckley's still alive, trying to get out on unsupervised release. The shooting of then President Reagan. Where is the bullet that he shot? That didn't explode, thank God, but an exploding bullet. He didn't know how to get a bullet to shoot it to explode. Where's the gun? Nobody knows. where they are. Does that mean that there's a cover-up with respect to it? Someday someone will say so. Medgar Evers exhumed some years ago. He died just shortly before, in June in 1963, just before the assassination of JFK. Where was the gun that Byron de la Beckwith used? A judge had it. Does that mean that the judge is involved in a conspiracy because he kept that gun, even though the culprit was out there after a mistrial? Sacco and Vanzetti, Dr. McGrath in Massachusetts marked the bullet, but nobody else did. The chain of custody was riotously inappropriate. And, of course, people are now saying that in the Sacco and Vanzetti there's been a substitution of bullets. Does that mean that, in fact, it did happen? Because people blundered and didn't do the right thing? Because, as Sherlock Holmes said in one of his stories, the police wallow around the scene. Wallow, like buffalo, as he said. In law, we like to say that when you point out errors, the question is whether or not those errors are harmless errors. Are they errors that contribute to a wrongful result, or they are just simply inconsequential? The Lincoln assassination is another one. Now, why the Lincoln assassination hasn't come around the horn the way JFK has, I can't explain, even though there has been literature saying that there is a reason for it. But how about the Derringer that wasn't found and identified until very recently? What about doing firearms testing? They didn't do it back in 1865. We could do it today. We've got new technology. Why don't we do it? If we can find the bullet, if we can find the Derringer, if we can be sure of it. I'll give you another example. I'm working in Gettysburg. We found a clavicle allegedly associated with a Confederate who died in the battle at Gettysburg. Well, the clavicle is so new looking, even though it's supposed to be 160 years old, so undecayed after 160 years, that I'm troubled by it. Should I do carbon-14 dating for the purposes of trying in this new technology to see if we can't narrow down the field of possibilities? Yes. Why? Because the person that I used with our bone-sniffing dog who found this clavicle has now been indicted in Michigan for planting bones at crime scenes. Aha! Now there's a reason for me to use new technology. The question is whether or not there's a reason to use new technology in the JFK case, among other questions. The first speaker today that we have for this moderated panel is Dr. Lee. You'll know him by his accent.
You're going to hear my accent. Last night, today, this morning, we learned so much. We have a lot of scholars, professors, researchers talk about what did happen November 22nd, 1963. Kennedy assassination, just like Cyril says, there are a lot of professors here, there are students here. I consider myself as a student of students. Really know very little about Kennedy assassination. But I do want to make one thing correct. Where's my slide? I have to, hey, Bing, do something. Where's my slide? Okay. I have to make a correction. Not like Cyril says, that time still wearing shorts and running around the street corner and play marbles. 1961, when Kennedy swore in, that time I already have clothes on my back. Is that forward? That shows 1961. Which one is me? Of course, the most handsome one, the first one. That time was a police captain in Taiwan. And of course, I heard the sad news. Somehow, 40 years, my career somehow kind of winding, twisting with Kennedy's family. Somehow got involved in Kennedy assassination investigation, RFK, of course you heard, on Scarecove and Willie Smith. Of course the issue here, so move so fast now, I did not touch anything. That must be made in Japan, something against them. Well, the issue is this a single assassin or a criminal conspiracy? That's an issue. Of course, we heard a lot of different versions of a story. So many books being published on this subject area. A lot of witnesses. And brutal film and documentation. Now I want it to move, it doesn't move. Boiled down to, is that a single bullet or a two bullet? A single bullet issue, you probably heard that one bullet probably caused all the wounds suffered by President Kennedy and the Governor Connally. The bullet passed through President's shoulder and trachea, then struck the governor's back, then broke the ribs and the wrist, and then hit the leg. Now that's kind of all different diagram version. I tried to find out which one is more likely. Of course, it's easy. You can just sit in your desk, make a line. And is that scientifically correct? I don't know. Just like a Chinese, we don't know nothing. And so I remember my mind open. The single bullet theory, of course, you have a group of people, FBI testing, Warren Commission, and recent study by other. However, Governor and Mrs. Connolly's statement says definitely hit by a different bullet. There are actual people involved, and recently John Connolly and others did some further study about this flip, and I was privileged got a copy of it, and which based on their study, the model said it has to be front and back. Again, I know nothing about it. And two bullet theory, of course, we have Dr. Wett and many other studies support that has to be shot by two different bullets. Then, of course, we heard a lot of testing, use goat, use cadaver, and use all kind of different things. And my involvement is much, much later when Kennedy Assassination Record Review Board asked me and Dr. Vincent DeMille to look at some of the evidence. However, when we participate in that review, we kind of a little bit disappointed we didn't actually see any actual physical evidence. What we did examine is some photograph. But many photographs become Xerox copies. Its original photo is gone, mysteriously disappeared from the file. We did look at the brutal film. When I look at the whole issue, there are in fact some forensic evidence. All the X-ray, photograph, film negative from autopsy at the scene, president's clothing, governor's clothing, medical sketch and notes, bullet and bullet fragments, spent casing, the weapon, the blood spatter in limo, X-ray of the governor, and photograph diagram of the president's vehicle, all the film, of course, the bullet film, that's the best documentation, and what all the FBI record, picture, document, and they apparently did the reenactment. So they are informations. Apparently, say 3,000 pieces of physical evidence. I don't have any knowledge where those evidence are and how many still remain. We did look at some of the records. Okay, we did look at some documents. As I say, we did look some of the videotapes. Just like everybody else, we're watching that over and over again. Did we learn anything about single bullet or multiple bullet? Assume CE 399 is the correct one. Just this morning we heard a lot of additional story. Now I start wondering, am I correctly showing that slide on that? Maybe just eliminate that. So forget about this bullet and let's just get rid of it. Maybe we just look at the wrong bullet, completely study the wrong bullet. However, if that bullet in fact went through that, probably should create more damage of the bullet. And apparently they say the bullet base have flattened a little bit, have an indentation in the metal ring and focal extrusion and the inner leg core. In other words, that bullet supposedly have some damage. Since I did not examine the bullet myself, I can't really tell you that's correct or not. If those photographs taken was correct, the bullet base do show some deformation. The interesting thing is, I tried to find a laser pointer here. The interesting thing here, well, it's too late now. Can you show me how to, yeah, go back though. All right, thank you very much. All right, the interesting thing here, you see this bullet base, you do see some foreign material adherent. So the information say no tissues, no human material on the bullet. I'm questioning this. I do see some foreign material here. So whether or not those foreign materials still exist, I don't know. But do looks like some foreign material to me. Next slide, please. Now the bullet fragment, they are fragments. Supposedly, that's 1 year intact bullet was found based on the record. Whether or not which stature or nurse found it, agent found it, whoever found it. Then we have 2 bullet fragments supposedly found in the president's limo. That's an established fact. Them say some smear of bullet was found on windshield, also near the curb. There are about, say, 40 bullet-like fragment, and I had X-ray, which I did not examine that X-ray myself last night. Sarah, we talked about this issue. Those are just based on the record I read. Whether or not correct or not, I don't know. Now, with all those bullet fragment and material, the neutron activation analysis, next one, apparently say these 2 fragments have a similar as this CE 399. Those are supposedly on the X-ray. When I look at the record, there are some opaque material, whether or not those are bullet fragments or not. So today, if scientifically, can we do a further study? Can we look at it again to solve the issue whether or not same type of bullet or different bullet? Maybe we can provide some answer. Next one. Fingerprint evidence is another piece of evidence. I have a lot of controversial relate to it, but with today's knowledge, we definitely list fingerprint evidence we can get the solution. The Warren Commission recovered 37 prints from 4 boxes used at Snapper's Nest in the bulk deposit. 24 fingerprints and 13 palm prints. FBI expert matched 2 palm prints and 1 fingerprint to Oswald. So except 1 print, the rest all matched police officer from Dallas and of course Lucy Forster from FBI. In other words, just 1 print in question. That 1 print in question subsequently was identified. Now, on a rifle, it's another issue. This on the barrel have a partial palm print smear. Then the safety plate, subsequently, they found 3 fingerprint unidentifiable. But later, a friend of mine and a good fingerprint examiner, unfortunately, he passed away before I have, we work on a lot of cases together. Vincent Sicalis, he say he found 18-point match Oswald. Next one. The snapper's nest, as we know, is established. The shooter, at this one, is from this window, 6th floor. Next one. And there are boxes. Next one. So Oswald's print was identified. Apparently have 13 points. That's a pretty good print. When I look at it, it has no problem. That's a positive ID. In other words, that's his print. Next one. The unknown print 29, that's the question print. Whose print it is? The latent print found in the center box, the bottom of the center box. Next one. Subsequently, they got an individual called Mac Wallace fingerprint card, and they match the number 10 digit, which the left hand, left little finger. Next one. Now that become a major controversial. Derby, he's a fingerprint examiner in Dallas PD, and he made ID, he think have a possible 14 point. Here, as you can see, that's a loop. Here's the delta area. Here's the delta area. He did find some point. The most valuable one is the number 1. That's a bifurcation. We can see this bifurcation here. The rest of it basically short ridges, ridge ending type of thing. However, next one, this 29. FBI's opinion is a no match. Subsequently, I have 2 law enforcement personnel from California. I did not find out their name, but to say agree to what point out of 14. The other 2 points, they disagree. Subsequently, another good fingerprint examiner, Germany, and he also a friend of mine, he disagreed. He say have a lot of differences. And subsequently, L. Johnson say that's an entire different print, nothing to do little finger 10. Hubmaster, a retired fingerprint examiner from Dallas PD, he made a tentative ID. He said he did not see original lip, just a copy. And of course, they were later sent to Interpol and say confirm that's a match. In year 2001, Darby says he further examination after enhancement, now he has 32 points of match. As you can see, fingerprint evidence, just like the Ebola, just like the rest of it, a lot of confusing. However, this confusion can be easily resolved with today, the image enhancement. We can, if have the original lip, we can probably resolve this issue, whether or not have another person fingerprint. Next one. If have an individual's fingerprint other than Lee Oswald, then could prove a second individual that day in the book deposit. In addition, those boxes, if we found those boxes, I did not know how they're processed. I assume using hygiene. By 1960s to today, we have so many new procedures now, method. We can further enhance those boxes, develop, see any additional fingerprint we can find. So those boxes if still available today, I think we may shine some light. Like yesterday, quite a few media comments say, why have this meeting? We still had the whole thing. When arguing about is the tape have a 3 shot, 4 shot. Now today I learned 5 shot. It's excellent. I learn something new every day. So fingerprint, at least we can do something. Next one. Next one. The bullet, of course, early days do bullet. We just look at a firearm match. But equally important, the trace evidence, hair, fabric, tissue, blood, and even the metal damage of the bullet can give us some story. Next one. So DNA evidence, when we review in 1998, we suggest should do some DNA. Recently I learned FFIP and FBI in year 2000 test Exhibit 567, that's a fragment. That's a fragment of the bullet. Find inconclusive. I did not see the result. I really don't know what the inconclusive means, whether or not they found DNA or no DNA. Or they found DNA beyond the detection limit, or they cannot interpret the mitochondrial DNA. Also, FBI did some tests. The blanket they found, and the limp hair, pubic hair, they found they did mitochondrial DNA linked to Oswald. Where we go from there? Here, of course, tomorrow afternoon we're going to have another panel. I'm going to talk a little bit more about DNA evidence. Next one. So how many shots were fired? I don't know. And I still don't know. Next one. Next one. So Dr. Bottom said 1, Dr. West said 2. I still don't know. Thank you very much.
The next new face to present is Mr. Groden, and we've allocated him 10 minutes.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for being here. You're the hope for the future. I'm supposed to talk about the Zapruder film and the legitimacy of it, and I think that Dr. Rohn did a fabulous job on that. I think that there's no need to go into that again. He proved beyond any question that it was legitimate, is legitimate, always will be legitimate. I am absolutely flabbergasted at the fabulous presentation by Dr. Thomas. Of all the people that are here today, I believe that I'm the only one who worked for the House Assassinations Committee and worked with the acoustics evidence at the time. I'm more known for work on the Zapruder film and the photographic evidence, but the acoustics evidence we worked on for several weeks. And it was I who synchronized the Zapruder film to the audio recordings for the House Committee. And I think it would be of far more value to add something new to the presentation than go over the idea of proving the Zapruder film to be legitimate. The evidence I'd like to deal with is exactly what you were dealing with, Don, and that is about the acoustics evidence, the alignment of the shots, things of that nature. When the acoustics evidence was originally brought to the House Committee and Professor Blakey, the professor thought it was absolutely ridiculous. He thought that this would be a total waste of time and energy, so naturally he grabbed it and he ran with it. Hopefully that it would disprove any possibility of conspiracy. In fact, that was not the case. It was referred to by those of us on the inside of the House Committee as Blakey's problem. It was Blakey's problem because it proved a conspiracy and more shots and at least one other shooter, probably more. There were issues that I wrote in my reports to the House committee, which have been suppressed and are still suppressed to this day and won't be released until 2029. Some of those things I was just overjoyed to hear Dr. Thomas talk about. Those main key issues are, number one, the source of the headshot. Let me explain. Blakey was convinced that we should show only that the third shot of the four that they confirmed missed. That's the one that came from the front. I knew it didn't miss. I saw and proved that it did come from the front. Not just me, though. The acoustics experts, Mark Weiss, Ernest Ashkenazi, they were with me when I did the work for the synchronization, and they both absolutely agreed, along with the majority of the actual House committee panelists themselves, the actual congressmen, that in fact what they were seeing were shots coming from the front, or at least the headshot coming from the front. But Blakey wouldn't have that. I was gagged. I was not allowed to talk about what I knew to be true. And he told me I'd be thrown in jail if I tried to express my opinion about it. So I had to keep quiet. And it was killing me because I was there when the work was being examined. How did we do it? Well, the Library of Congress has many, many millions of dollars worth of recording equipment and projection equipment. But ironically, they did not have a single projector anywhere that would project at 18 frames per second, the approximate speed of the Zapruder film. Everything they had was for sound synchronization, which is 24 frames per second. Well, how would we possibly match these two up? Well, I came up with the idea of bringing in a portable projector that had a recording capability to it. Fortunately, when I made the Zapruder copies for the synchronization, I used the Secret Service copy, which was intact. No splices, no errors in time to be made up. And I used a magnetic track. What we did is we took a Nagra portable tape recorder with sound-corrected, time-corrected sounds of the shots, and we synchronized it to the Zapruder film on magnetic track two ways. Number one, with the third shot, the shot from the front, matching the headshot. One with the fourth shot, the one that Blakey wanted, coming from behind, matching the headshot. The results were startling. Startling. When you match the fourth shot, the Blakey shot, the shot from behind, to the headshot, no other shot correlates to anything happening on that film. But when you take the third shot, the one that shows the shot coming from the front, there is a physical, visual correlation for every other shot on that tape. Once again, Blakey never allowed that to be known, even though he knew it to be true. The first person to ever confirm that and do the peer analysis of that and come up to an independent conclusion was Dr. Thomas. And I've never heard him say that until just today. I could cry, I'm so happy. I'm serious. It was so very important. One thing I'm also very, very happy about is that he confirmed 5 shots instead of 4. Because Blakey never let it be known, but there were actually 7 shot impulses that they believed to be shots. Not 6, not 5, not 4, 7. Now, some of those occurred slightly outside the range that was allowed to be considered for shots within that period of time. But Blakey's problem was just getting around that 4th shot. Eventually, he couldn't. He had a lot of other evidence that led to that conclusion. Eyewitness testimony, acoustics evidence, photographic evidence, filmed evidence, all of it. It was all there. In the end, he was stuck with having the film, which he couldn't deny. He had the acoustics evidence, which he couldn't deny. And there they were sunk together, proving that he was wrong in the fact that the fatal shot did, in fact, come from the front. But if they confess that, then they've got to say that whether Lee Harvey Oswald fired or not, he didn't kill the president. The fatal shot came from the front, and Oswald could not have fired that shot one way or the other. So I've strayed away from something. I do have a lot of friends here, a lot of people who've worked with me now for, my gosh, well over 30 years in this case. The greats are here, and I'm so proud to be here with them. There are quiet heroes in this room, people who have never gotten credit for the work that they have done. Roger Feynman, for one, you'll be seeing him later. And please listen to what he has to say, because he's a man who has given up his life for this case. And he is truly a hero. My friend Jerry Polikoff just handed me something that we did a long, long time ago. Gallery Magazine, of all things, several years ago, back in 1979, July of 79, published the sounds to the public for the first time of the shots from the police tape on this little cardboard record. And several things about that, and then I'll get out of the way and let others speak. But a couple of things. One thing that was discovered by the acoustic scientists is that what they were dealing with was not the original tape. They were dealing with a duplicate. The way they found that out is they found 2 sets of 60-cycle hum on the duplicate tape. Each set of 60-cycle hum, which is the sine wave, represents one separate recording. In this case, we have 2, therefore it was a duplicate and could possibly have been edited somewhere along the line, which would also help with the problem they were having with aligning the first and second police channels. Second of all, for the House Committee, and if you can find the volumes, I believe it's in volume 5 of the House Committee supporting volumes, I actually did quite a bit of work on the photographic evidence. It was I who found H.B. McLean, Hollis McLean, photographically where he was supposed to be. I remember that morning very well. It was about 11:30 in the morning. I got a call from Professor Blakey, and he asked if I had any photographic evidence of a police officer about 8 car lengths behind the president. And within 15 minutes, I came up with the pictures that we have here. Unfortunately, we don't have them transferred for there, but they do exist, including the moment where Officer McLean reaches down and keys the microphone and starts the recording at precisely the moment when the recording began. And that was from the DCA compilation, Dallas Cinema Associates compilation. We also have him photographed from the from the 4th floor window of the depository at the time of the shooting on the Dorman film. It's all there. And what Dr. Thomas said is absolutely true and is some of the most exciting new evidence in this case. So before I go, once again, for those of you who are young or students or here, you are the hope for the future. I'm going to be 58 years old tomorrow, and it's going to be, I don't know how many more years I've got left doing this, but I will do it as long as I can breathe. And for those of you who've been doing it even longer than I, Dr. Wecht, Tink Thompson, all the rest, this is the hope for the future, and this is the only way we're ever going to find out the truth. So thank you.
Simple question: why can't they tell if there were 2 different assassins by the bullet impact? Obviously, the grassy knoll was 105 feet away, and I would think the book depository was at least 1,000 feet away. Why can't they tell by the impact and the size of the hole in the president and in Governor Connolly by the distance?
Anyone want to handle that?
Yeah, there's no difference. I mean, I don't think it's 1,000 feet. How many feet is it from how far is it from the depository to Kennedy at 313?
A little under 300.
Yeah, right. A bullet, if it hits somebody at 100 feet or hits somebody at 400 feet and hasn't hit anything else first, is going to cause the same size hole.
Well, I'm not convinced that the evidence sustains any shot from the Texas School Book Depository.
Anyone else?
Well, I would add simply that the House Committee, and Dr. Thomas touched on this too, what we ended up dealing with was a report that was somewhat nebulous. They said at least one shot from the grassy knoll, but they also said shots from behind in the general direction of the depository. They never said that they came specifically from that window. In fact, they did not. At least 1 or 2 of them may have. But what they did is they took what basically is a cone. They started with the point of entry in the president's back, although they dealt with the wrong location of that when they moved it up 7 inches. They also increased the cone wide enough until it finally took in the area of the sixth floor window. In fact, all they simply said is that the shots came from behind and never went far enough into determining the exact direction of that hole or that bullet or where it went. The photographs that showed the probe in the president's back from the autopsy pictures disappeared from the National Archives long before I was ever able to release the other ones.
I can add one other feature to that, and that is that directionality can be, to some extent, determined by the configuration of the hole in bone. Now, as far as flesh is concerned, it's another story. But if you're talking about an entrance or an exit in bone, directionality can be somewhat effective with respect to the configuration of the entrance wound, regardless of its size. We did that with respect to, Dr. Ubelacher did it with respect to the killing of Dr. Weiss after he allegedly shot Huey Long, and it can be very effective.
And in addition to what you just said, that exact point is kind of interesting. Dr. Ken Salyer, some of you may have seen the news stories the last several weeks about the separation of the conjoined twins. Dr. Salyer, who led that team, was also present in the life-saving efforts for President Kennedy. He observed the president's head wounds perhaps closer than anybody, since it was his job to try to reconstruct the head could the president be saved. And Dr. Salyer pointed out to me in an interview that I did several years ago on the autopsy photographs, which I showed him for the first time and he had never seen before. He pointed out the exit wound, the outside beveling of the exit wound in the rear of the president's skull, which is exactly what you were just pointing out.
The question on this side.
Thank you. My name is Howard Schwartz, just an interested researcher from Connecticut. My question is primarily for Dr. Lee. When I read autopsy reports, including the ones that were done on President Kennedy, there's usually quite a bit of detail in there. There was more detail in the autopsy report than there was in the photos. There are no landmarks or no measurements of any sort. And as I read through it, and I think I asked Dr. Weck this when he visited WestCon, was whether or not he believed that Humes and Boswell were presented with a body that they knew had somehow been tampered with before it arrived at them. My question is, in their description of the autopsy itself, when they said they removed the brain and simply fixed it in formalin, there was no description of how they did it. There are a whole bunch of gaps in the autopsy report. Would that be attributable to pressure? Would it be attributable to leaving it out on purpose because there was something that they could not reconcile? What do you make of the quality of the pictures and of the written report itself?
As I begin my talk, as I'm a student of the student in this topic area, I try to read a lot. In my career, probably assistant investigate over 7,000 major cases, and this case, I have to tell you, I still don't know what's going on. Most of the cases, after about 2-3 hours study, I know basically what's going on here. Here, I don't have the complete documentation. I know it's available. Many of them spend their career reading that. I did not. I just read some books and did some study papers. Autopsy, you're probably going to hear from Dr. Noguchi, Dr. Bowden, and Dr. Weck again. It's not the perfect autopsy, as a matter of fact, and they're not board qualified, and they never did the gunshot wound before. So we know that have some issue and problem. The photograph I looked when I, 1998, involved in reviewing it, we only saw few original photographs. No negatives, and many are Xerox copy. When I inquire about this, they say just disappeared. People took it, and people took it. I don't know who took it, but that's why I can't really say beyond what I have said.
May I ask then, Mr. Groden, then, are any of the photographs that you saw authentic, untouched photographs? Because I read your books, and it seemed like they've all been touched up.
To answer your question, the only photographs that I found that have absolute proof, verification of forgery, are the ones of the rear of the president's head, where you see a very obvious crop line, and the ones where my interview with over 20 of the witnesses dealing with the body have all said, without exception, that the rear of the head was not that way when they saw it. Except for the ones at the rear of the head, I have no reason to doubt the other ones. As far as alteration of the body goes, the only evidence of that is the fact that when I interviewed Dr. Perry, he told me that he did not create that wound. He said he stood up shocked, and he pointed at the photograph, which, I had shown him for the first time. He said, "I didn't do that." He said, "That's a butcher job." A tracheotomy hole is the size of a pencil. To put a tube down there, if it leaks, it defeats the purpose. This hole is large enough to stick a fire hose down. It didn't work that way at all. It's sad, but that's the case. As far as the autopsy itself goes, the late Harold Weisberg, one of the original researchers in this case, said that Lee Harvey Oswald was given the autopsy of a king, and President Kennedy was given the autopsy of a Bowery bum. When he testified before the House Assassinations Committee, Commander Humes, on his way out, standing by the elevator, said, "Well, they had their chance and they blew it."
A question from this side.
My name is Rex Bradford. Can you hear? I thought the presentations this morning were very apropos to, I guess, a general question I have, which is for anyone here, which is about what the limits of forensic science are in a major political murder like this. I found it very interesting that the hardest evidence for conspiracy seems to be drawn from evidence which is either not in government hands or not recognized in the case of the acoustics as being relevant, whereas the evidence which tends to support the government's case, autopsy photos, bullets and bullet fragments, is all stuff held in government hands. The case there's been a 40-year expose for anyone to read about the long litany of the government's non-objectivity in this case, and suppressed interviews, and go on and on that topic. And I guess, if this was a case in Soviet Russia of the 1964 assassination of Khrushchev, let's say, we'd all be laughing about, if there was some scientific proof of a bullet match. People would just say, well, the KGB switched the bullets, And I guess my question is, at what point do any of the panelists think a reasonable person who's read that long, sorry history might be disinclined to weigh scientific analysis of evidence which has no chain of history or chain of command associated with it?
I'd love to try that one.
Dr. Rohn?
My confusion about the bullet came from the fact that this has to do with memory. It has to do with witness reports. It seems to me that what we're seeing happening today in this room is pretty important. A lot of the confusion in this case comes from the mixing of witness reports with either photographs, physical evidence, etc. I think what we're seeing today is the emergence of the hegemony of physical evidence, such as photographs. David Rohn's attack on the claim that the Zapruder film has been altered could be added by many other arguments. I think that claim is about to self-destruct. So what we have is here, we have the basis for considerable progress. If you take a photograph of an event and other people take photographs of that event from different angles, right? Same event, different photographs, different angles. That web of photographic evidence is self-authenticating. If anybody screws with one of the photographs, it's going to show up because that photograph is not going to match what you see in the others. That hasn't happened. In other words, the photographic evidence about Dealey Plaza forms a self-authenticating whole. In addition, Don Thomas's work now on the acoustics gives us another basis, another baseline. So it seems to me what's emerging over against witness testimony, which Elizabeth Loftus, the ruling expert on all this, indicates in her various books, various situational things which degrade witness testimony. All of those things are present in Dealey Plaza. So it seems to me that as we watch here emerging two different baselines, the acoustics the Zapruder film and other photographic evidence from Dealey Plaza. One is actually witnessing the emergence of a basis for considerable progress in the future. And I think, Rex, somewhere or other, that was in your question. I hope so.
Anybody else on the panel wish to comment?
Did you want to say something?
I'd make an observation, if I may. Well, I think if you look at the Oswald factor, there's 100% of the evidence, that's witness, forensic, physical, and on, proves it's official evidence that he didn't take the rifle to work that morning. And 100% of the evidence that they had showed that he wasn't on the 6th floor. And these things are very cogent. These are official evidence generated by the Warren Commission and submerged by their allegations. I think that's very clear, and that has to be worked out more in great detail in the future. And I think that's really a sound point.
I'd like to add one other thing to what I said before, and I didn't. As I said, I was planning on speaking about something else. Dr. Thomas mentioned the fact that the House committee ignored one of the impulses simply because it was too close. Well, the importance of that, Blakey was well aware of too, and I spent much time trying to convince him of it, and he avoided every bit of it. And that is that two shots coming from the same direction, too close together, indicates the fact of at least a third assassin, possibly more. But those two shots, so close together, well within the minimum firing time of the weapon, shows not only an additional shooter from the front, but at least an additional shooter from behind as well.
Is there anybody else on this side? Would you like to go to the microphone in the back, sir?
I have a question for D.B. Thomas. My name is Hal Verb. I've been examining the Kennedy assassination since the very first day of the assassination, and I have an extreme interest in the photographs of the assassination, including the Zapruder film. And one of the statements you made in a presentation in November 2001 about the acoustic evidence, you made a sentence statement that said, "The evidence for the first shot striking the president is lacking." I think you are completely erroneous on this point, and I'm not merely speaking about the non-acoustical evidence, which I can get into, and the acoustical evidence, but on both sides, the acoustics and non-acoustics, you are wrong. And my reasons for saying that is, you are wrong because the first shot evidence can be seen by Harold Weisberg's work, Ray Marcus's work, Doug D. Sal's who's here, Barbara John Carrion who's here, my original paper which I delivered about 10 years ago showing that was wrong, plus the brilliant and excellent presentation by Professor Rohn, who this morning presented an excellent and compelling case for why the first shot must have occurred at 189, 190. Here's my question to you. I sent you a letter some time ago, which you never answered. It's about an 18-page letter showing where your errors were in knocking down the first shot argument. I would like to get an answer from you, I hope, someday. But here's my question. In your diagrams today, and also in the diagrams submitted in November 2001, when the microphone were placed by the reenactment by the House Select Committee, there is no microphone that's set behind the pergola.
Can we get to your question?
My question is, if you're going to make the statement that there's no acoustic evidence, you're right. There is no evidence showing a microphone behind the pergola, and that would be compelling to show that a shot may have been fired from behind.
Let's see if you've said enough for one of the panelists to respond.
This is D.B. Thomas.
Mr. Groden is willing to respond.
I'd like to, if I can, because in the last few years I've developed and found a great deal of evidence that shows that, in fact, you may very well be right about that. There were several witnesses, including a Secret Service agent and Gene Newman, who saw a shot, the first shot, actually strike and miss the car completely, hitting the pavement by the right front tire of the car. At that point, which is at 189, or no, actually it's before that, it's about 154, 155, the president actually stops, turns, and looks toward the grassy knoll and stops waving. He then starts to wave again. My interpretation of what I see visually is that the first shot did in fact miss. The president heard it, thought it was a backfire or a firecracker or something else, then started to wave again. But there were 2 witnesses that saw this hit. Unfortunately, there's no photographic evidence that in fact it did. But Jean Newman is ready to take a lie detector test. She'll swear on a stack of Bibles that she did in fact see that bullet strike by the right front wheel of the car. And it headed from front to rear. The direction of the travel of the spatter of the concrete on the ground would show that. This would be one at the time, the exact time, of the first splice in the Zapruder film. For the second, for the one at 189, the one that you were talking about this morning, Dr. Thomas, we dealt with that with the House Assassinations Committee. We actually took individual photographs and spread them out across the floor in line, looking for differences and reaction time. Right after 189, there is a blur that does occur, which corresponds exactly with the one at 189. And once again, Blakey was aware of that. But since the tree was in the way, he had to bury that one as well.
Anybody else in the panel?
Well, I was going to make my observations on Mr. Lee's work a little later on, I guess.
Something to Hal.
Okay. Dr. Thomas would like to make a comment.
Hal, your letter is in my briefcase. And the reason I apologize for not answering sooner, but it was like your question. There was just so much information. I would go to my computer and I would take one problem and write out an about a page answer, and I'd come down to the next one and write another page, and I just never got a chance to finish your whole letter. Let me just address the sequence. It's correct, and I agree with Dr. Rohn's sequence. And in fact, it's not my sequence, it's the House Select Committee's photographic panel and others. The first reaction you see is Governor Conley. He turns his head. Then you see President Kennedy. The next reaction is his arm, as he's waving, he's resting his arm and he was waving to the crowd, and all of a sudden he comes up and he goes like this. So it's a classic startle reaction. Then you see Governor Conley get hit, and then you see President Kennedy get hit. Each of those is preceded by, you can match them up in the Zapruder film to these sounds, except for Conley's. Conley's was the first reaction, and that would be set prior to what I identified here, what the acoustical experts identified as the first shot. That would correlate to about frame 175, whereas Conley started to move back around frame 160. As Robert stated, there's 2 other sounds in this sequence. 5 of those 7 have the acoustical fingerprint of gunshots in that they have 10 impulses, the criteria that around 10 impulses each. The 2 earlier sounds don't. One of them is a single sound. It's just a single loud impulse. But our criteria is that there has to be an echo pattern after it, so that sound was discarded. The next sound has 4 impulses, and that corresponds to where Governor Conley reacted. So I suspect there really was a sound that preceded the gunshots, and it was a loud noise, but not as loud as a gunshot. Okay, fine.
All right. Which makes me so lovable. That's why I had to promise them before the panel that I'd buy them lunch at the expense of Duquesne. Next question on this side.
My name is Dave Hall. I'm from Marquette, Michigan. And my question, perhaps for Mr. Groden or for the panel, has regards to a fragment that was found across from the grassy knoll, is known as the Billy Harper fragment. It's my understanding that this young man found a piece of skull and turned it over to his uncle, I believe, who was a forensic pathologist, and that he did confirm that it was a piece of human skull. I'm not aware if there had been any kind of definitive response to this proof of a strike coming from the grassy knoll. I just wondered if anyone could share with me any of their information in regards to this Billy Harper fragment. Thank you.
Well, Billy Harper, I'm sorry.
I would suggest that either Dr. Aguilar or Dr. Manick would be probably in a better position to answer that.
Hold that to the afternoon session.
Well, yeah, let me give you what I can, and they can add to that later on. The Harper fragment was found the next morning by Billy Harper. It was taken to his uncle, Dr. Carnes, who examined it. He was a forensic pathologist. He discovered that it was a piece of human occipital bone, specifically a piece of, or the majority of, the external occipital protuberance. If you reach around to the back of your head, you'll feel a bump. That's part of it. I'm certainly not a doctor. There's far more qualified people here dealing with that. But one of the interesting things is that it wasn't found till the next morning, and it was found 41 feet to the rear and left of the point of impact in the grass across the street. Right now, to memorialize it, there's actually a light pole now that wasn't there then on virtually the exact spot. What's amazing about that piece is it wasn't found till the next morning, yet the x-rays that night show what purports to be that very same piece of bone. This always was quite startling to me.
Has there been any research in regards to that, and is that bone still available for research or investigation?
As I understand it, and Cyril would probably have the answer
We
to
can
that.
get more on that this afternoon from the panelists who are being discussing, I'm sure, that issue.
I'd appreciate it.
But as I understand that, all the bone fragments have disappeared along with the
Why don't
brain.
we take another question from this side?
Thank you. My name is Harry Crushpain. I'm from Dean College outside of Boston, Massachusetts. My question is for Dr. Thomas and probably Mr. Groden also as a follow-up on the acoustics. I'm really looking for a clarification. It's my understanding that the analysis that was done by the House Select Committee, and there were some questions raised, but then a special committee headed by Dr. Ramsey from Harvard at the National Academy of Sciences looked and studied that, and they found no fourth shot or fourth impulse on that tape at all on their findings. And I understand, too, that Failure Analysis just this past week has come out with some studies that one of their technicians done on the acoustics. But my question is directed to the Ramsey report and the clarification. Is it valid, not valid? How do you attack it? Where is it weak? Where is it strong? Thank you.
Dr. Thomas?
The National Research Council didn't say there was just not a fourth shot. The National Research Council said there were no shots. And the evidence for that...
I'm sorry, but it says one of the findings summary, they found a no shot, fourth shot coming to grassy knoll.
No shots. They found no shots on the tape recording at all. And the reason they gave, they said that it was recorded, the sounds were deposited on the recording 1 minute after the assassination happened. But that was based on the synchronization with one of those other crosstalks. Now, recently, the Bob Berkowitz was on TV about 2 nights ago, and I can't fairly comment on it because I haven't seen Berkowitz's written report, so I can only base it on what he said in the television program, and I would say this. What you're doing is you're comparing a pattern that's your test shot with your pattern on the police tape. You cannot make a direct comparison, a simple, let's see if they match up, for 3 reasons. First of all, the air temperature was different in August of 73 or 78 and 65. So an adjustment that you have to make before you can make a fair comparison is to air temperature. Secondly, the test shot was fired and recorded on a stationary microphone. The motorcycle, of course, would have been in motion. So you have to make an adjustment for the speed of the motorcycle. And thirdly, you have to take into account recorder speed. Now, the shot's a high-fidelity recording. I'm almost done. But the other sound, you adjust for tape speed. So all 3 of those adjustments go into it. Now, I'm assuming, I'd rather stop, that nobody here is fudging any evidence and that nobody is incompetent, that this was a fair and competent analysis. You have to factor in all 3 of those, and as a consequence, it's very easy to get a false negative, because a simple error will give you a false negative, but a simple error will not give you a false positive.
Thank you.
I'm Martin Kelly, a depressed Met fan from New York City. To Dr. Thomas, about the report on television, I guess it was Berkowitz who suggested that, independent of the comparisons between test shots and what was on the dicta belt, that the dicta belt impulses themselves, all 4 official House Committee impulses, on microstructural analysis did not resemble each other. And therefore, either one of them was a shot and the other 3 weren't, or that none of them were a shot. Could he respond to that?
Have the floor for
Well,
1.5 minutes.
I thought I just did.
May I?
You talked about a test shot, sir. This is the what he presented was that if you take the 4 impulses, not the test impulses, but the impulses on the dicta belt, and run them through a program which he didn't explain to us, obviously. He says when you look at the microstructure that these
That's
4
right.
are not, do not resemble each other.
Well, they shouldn't look like each other because they're from different places. For example, if you look at the gunshot from the test shots from the book depository, you see a sequence, a careful sequence that are the shots for essentially all the intervals are very close. The gunshot from the grassy knoll has 2 clusters. One cluster and then about a 90 millisecond separation, then another cluster. And the reason is from that direction when you fire a shot, the echoes from the structures facing Elm Street come first, and then there's a slight gap, and then there's impulses from Houston Street come in. So yeah, from different positions you're going to get a different pattern.
Very simply, too, may I add, and this will take 2 seconds, simply, it's easy for them to say they're not shots, but not one of them will tell you what they might be instead. What would have an acoustic fingerprint of a shot if it's not a shot? And they've never attempted to do that.